One of my favorite things about your country is how like steeped in your own personal history it is. It's just so fascinating.
Growing up in Dubai, one of the biggest things I had to deal with is convincing my mom that it was okay to go out with my friends to a bonfire and that the jinn weren't going to get me. That was her argument. This is a fight I've had with a grown, educated woman that, you're going to the jinn's territory. You don't know if you end up, pissing off a bad one. And so one of the things we do is leave the embers as a thank you. And I always found that hilarious, and I would tell the story all the time since I moved out here, is that, I would have to convince my mom that the supernatural beings out in the desert will be fine if I go hang out with them for a little bit. And so I just wanted to bring that to life here, is that you have to have a great respect for your environment, knowing that it is very intentionally, very possibly out to kill you. Hold on, let me just make sure I have everything.
So excited to be here. One of my favorite players.
Thank you. And you are definitely my favorite DM.
Thank you all so much for joining us as we begin our session zeros of The Lands That Make Us, a collaborative D&D project where together with four of my favorite players of all time, we are collaboratively meeting and making individual countries where the players will be people from those countries, and they will all meet together at a Peacemeet, a singular kind of intergovernment meeting to discuss the kind of situations between their countries. And then from there, we'll go on to be a Sandbox style D&D campaign where the party of heroes will adventure through each of these beautifully crafted and created environments. So today we're here with, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Neda. I am 34. I've been playing D&D for about 5 to 6 years, almost exclusively with Robbie. I still consider myself a novice, just a heads up out there, because the mechanics and the lore of Dungeons and Dragons is just so a lot. There's so much to it, and I'm always learning something new. Just a disclaimer, I work with children, specifically children on the autism spectrum, and the only reason I mention this is because I've noticed that it does have a slight effect on my playstyle and personality. I do tend to be a little childish. Um, I just want you to know that's who I really am. Another thing I would like the listeners to know about me is that I am Egyptian. And the reason I feel the need to mention it is because I've been feeling so homesick lately that I decided to base a lot of this country that I've created on just little parts and concepts from back home. It is not in any way a representation of a specific country or city or group of people, just things that I miss about home, parts of my culture, society, the way people interact, that I decided to bring to life in this world that we're building.
I love that so much. And I will also say with a big disclaimer that I am not at all Egyptian. I am a Caucasian man. But with all things, I will try my absolute best in ensuring pronunciations are as respectful as possible and kind of honoring those bits and pieces as we combine it into our fantasy landscape here. But yeah, I'm so excited to learn more. First and foremost, what is your country's name?
It is called Luxoria. The name is based on the city Luxor, or Luxor as it's known here in Egypt. It's a beautiful tourist attraction that I totally recommend to anyone that wants to visit. So yeah, it is a very sort of ancient pharaonic city that is out in the desert, and that's kind of the feel I wanted to get for my country. So Luxoria
Luxoria.
is yes.
Luxoria. It sounds like very regal for sure. In broad terms for me, looking down on Luxoria, kind of starting from the south, moving up to the north, what is it like?
So it is largely mainly desert, lots of desert dunes, sand everywhere, and then it is dotted by oases. Some, of course, are larger than others, and you'll notice that the population, the people are centered around these oases because it is a necessary source for survival. There's one main city, the capital and the largest city, called Wahid al Ahlam, and it is in the center. And then you do see another large structure city off to the northwest on the map. And the third main destination is a resort city on the south coast of the desert. Otherwise, it is quite barren, with the exception of those dotted oases and a few sort of man-made waterways that have been built from these water sources to sort of ensure some irrigation for. God, why do I keep thinking architecture? It's not architecture. Agriculture. Yes, for agricultural purposes.
I love that. Let's focus in for now just a little bit more on the capital city. What was the name of the capital again?
The capital is called Wahid al Ahlam.
Wahid Atalem?
Wahid al Ahlam.
Wahid al Ahlim. I didn't.
Yeah, very good.
Wahid al Ahlim.
And that is Arabic for the oasis of dreams. The capital city, yes, the capital city of Luxoria, Wahid al Ahlam, is the first destination for anyone that would immigrate to the country. This country was built on the concept of refuge. It was originally started by groups of people that had escaped other lands due to any form of abuse, racism, just generally people that have been downtrodden. They all escaped to this desert that was uninhabited at the time, with the exception of nomadic tribes. Going there, seeking their dreams of freedom, of autonomy, and individuality, they eventually built this country, starting at this city where a oasis used to exist, the largest oasis in the country. Somehow, no one knows how because it was long ago, but the oasis dried up. And instead of being a disaster, loss of life, basically, it turned out to be this gorgeous quarry of minerals, sands, just stones that actually shines in a like rainbow of colors in the sunlight. And because this potentially disastrous event turned out to be so life-giving, this city, this oasis, this whole area gained that name, Wahid al Ahlam. It is a place where people come to discover dreams, but it is also a place where even the worst disaster can bring about new dreams.
I love that. I love that kind of rebirth there, where in this absolutely desolate place, there was this kind of one oasis, and it did eventually dry up, but then I love that. That's such a cool idea.
Exactly. And if you want to picture it, think of a very large lake that dried up. So now you've got this basin that is actually a quarry of layered colors in the stone. And there's small pockets, if you were to visit it closely, that are caves that people go in to mine all these natural resources.
Very cool. And is that kind of what it looks like? This rainbow of different stones in this quarry?
Absolutely. It in doing my research, I was looking at pictures of mountains, the Rainbow Mountains in Peru and China. And so if you want to think of those but inverted in a quarry sense, yes, you see layers in the stone where the stone itself seems to shimmer with different colors. And when the light hits it in a specific time of day, and then of course the time of year, it is set to reflect about and create this array of light in the air itself.
That's so beautiful. In Wahata Alalim, would you walk me through kind of a day in the life? What does it look like for somebody here who is completely disadvantaged in this modern day Luxoria, kind of post this drying of the Rainbow Quarry in, uh, in this new oasis of dreams?
Absolutely. So in Luxoria, even the most disadvantaged citizen has a purpose. This is a country that is based on merit and skill. For you to be a citizen here, you have to have a trade, again, skill, something to contribute to the society as a whole. And so you would belong to a guild that is responsible for whatever work it is you do. I would imagine someone like the most disadvantaged of the culture or the society would be someone who works as a miner in the quarry, for example, who would wake up super early at dawn, walking down some of the streets on the outskirts of town. Again, this is a beautiful city. It is rich and vibrant in culture and history. So even the less developed parts of the city towards the outside, you can see signs of this. All the glass is colored glass, stained glass, or melted minerals mixed with glass. The fabrics that are used, the awnings, are all beautiful colors and vibrant, sort of to bring life to this desolate land that's desert. And I would imagine they would be walking down these streets, would get some very interesting meal from a food stand or cart walking by that sold some special spiced meats or fruit and pies. And they would spend their mornings mining, um, and then head back at the end of the day, check in at their guild and get their pay for whatever it is they were able to do, and head over to, let's say, a pub of sorts, a place for just recreation for people to gather at the end of their day, have a drink. Now, another notable thing about Luxoria is things like sex work. It's not only considered normal, but it's considered a fine art form. So you would very normally find people making out in the streets, or if you're in a pub and people are getting a little indecent, that is perfectly fine. That is an expression of passion and connection. And, if one of them is doing this as part of like a job, it's the same as someone getting up in a pub and singing.
Beautiful. Okay. That's a good day. You know what I mean? Like that's a fine day for
a disadvantaged person. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that the poorest citizen of this country can still, they're still making something of themselves. Not all is lost here. So let's talk a little bit more about the government of Wahid al-Ahlam.
Okay, so the government of Luxoria as a whole is led by the Council of Sun and Sands.
Council of Sun and Sand. I love that so much.
So the council seats. One second. I always get this number wrong. There are 9 seats on the Council of Sun and Sands.
I'm sure as we play, we'll get to know each of the heads of the council here. But let's just kind of focus in on, let's say, 2 of the most important members, or 2 of the members closest to your character.
The head of the council is the emir, or if the current term is a woman, then the emira. And their position is the voice of the people. Their only responsibility is to make sure that every species and every group of people in Luxoria is represented and taken into account whenever the council makes any decisions or changes. This individual is always a dragonborn, a member of the indigenous tribes that once roamed the desert as nomads before it became Luxoria. And because those tribes took in all of these, whether they be slaves or just refugees, runaways, taught them how to survive in this land and gave them a place to be without expecting anything back, or demanding any sort of allegiance to a religion or concept. Life here, because it's so about merit and skill, and you have to give a lot, it is really important for the people who maintain this country that the country gives back.
That the citizens are able to like find pleasure in the little things.
Find pleasure, stay motivated to keep being productive. And of course, the Gilded Rose. This is the councilwoman of artisans and craftsmen and also courtesans. Like I said, sex is a fine art form in Luxoria, and it is one of the ways that she rose to power. She was a courtesan, a beautiful woman that was greatly valued for her mind as well as her skills, and slowly grew in rank by being seen on the arms of different men and women of power, and sort of became integrated into this world and eventually gained her seat. And she's had her seat for many terms.
You know how excited I am to play the Gilded Rose as an NPC already. From a species perspective, walking through the streets of the capital or this resort town, what are some of the species that you see? Obviously, it's going to be pretty diverse, right? It's kind of this diaspora of like different folks from all these other countries. I think that word means what I think it means. That all came together to kind of start this place under the tutelage of these indigenous dragonborn clans. But what do nowadays walking through the streets of Wahit al Halem? What species are you seeing?
Well, whether you're in Wahid al Ahlam or any of the other streets, you would, of course, you're right, see a lot of diversity in terms of species. It does take a stronger constitution to want to live in the desert and be able to survive comfortably. So you do see a lot of more magically inclined species. Ganassi, elves, tieflings, tabaxi. God, I can never remember how to pronounce them properly, but bird people, like eagles.
Aarakocra, Kenku.
Thank you. Yeah, Aarakocra. These are all commonly found, but even if you were to see a human or a halfling walking down the street, it wouldn't make you stop and stare. It's normal to see everyone, a representation of every race. But yes, the ones that I mentioned, Goliaths, Eladrins, can be more commonly found just because they don't have as hard of a time dealing with the environment.
I just love the idea that the country itself is this kind of constant celebration of ability and community, and where like the base expectation for survival is teamwork, right? Like in order to survive here, you have to work together and kind of build this net of keeping everybody safe and happy with the small things. I love that.
Absolutely. And it's if to give it a little more flavor for the listeners, it's something that was inspired by my childhood. I am Egyptian, but I was actually raised in Dubai. And this is the environment I grew up in. I never grew up with one nationality or one dialect or one language consistently being spoken around me. Dubai, if anyone ever goes to visit, is equally inhabited by people from all around the world. It's an idea that was really interesting to grow up around. And I really wanted to bring that to life here and then throw a little dash of magic on it.
Amazing. So in the scheme of Luxoria, and this might be the last time I call you this, Nada, who are you in Luxoria?
In Luxoria, I transformed to become Inara. Inara is a young tabaxi woman. She is the young daughter of the Gilded Rose, the third of fourth children. And so while growing up, super, what's the word? Privileged? Let's go with that. Growing up privileged in an already privileged city, there wasn't as much responsibility placed on her as her older siblings. And so she had a lot more chance to explore all of the opportunities that were presented to her. And thanks to that, she ends up becoming an alchemist, an artificer, because she gains an insane interest at a very young age in just alchemy in general. the study of nature, of substances in nature. And as a tabaxi as well, she already has an extremely curious, inquisitive mind. And alchemy sort of like made that explode 1,000 times over. Inara's favorite thing about being an alchemist, which she thinks is sort of her twist on science, is that she doesn't believe in hypotheses. She thinks this is a limitation that scientists set on themselves whenever starting an experiment. If you're already looking for something to happen, then you are excluding all these other possibilities that could. And instead, that makes her a very spontaneous sort of ADHD little kitty that likes to go ahead with things without really thinking through the possible outcomes, because she doesn't want to stop herself from experiencing the impossible outcomes.
That's such a fun character. I'm so excited to see her enter this world kind of outside of Luxoria, outside of the bubble that she's been able to grow in, and see how she adapts
Absolutely.
to kind of unknown territories.
Yeah, she being young, it's going to be a lot of fun playing someone who's experiencing a lot of places for first time. But another thing I am really excited about playing Inara is this is the first time I've created a character that doesn't really have any trauma. And I sort of did that on purpose. I wanted someone who still had that sort of naive rose colored glasses look of the world. A little naive, a little sort of shallow maybe for someone who's as smart as she is. But yeah, I wanted to for once play someone who hasn't lost anyone important, hasn't seen anyone die, hasn't killed anyone.
Well, let's just take a moment of silence and pray together that that continues for a little bit longer.
Robbie, I've played with you for 5 years. I know it's not gonna last, but I will enjoy it while it does.
So Inara, the alchemist, Inara, the third daughter of the Gilded Rose, is Inara part of a guild herself? Is there like an alchemy guild that she belongs to?
There's definitely an alchemy guild, but she does not yet belong to it. Being only 22, she is still sort of exploring. While she knows she is an alchemist and that's something that she's very passionate about, she does not want to start working just yet. A college kid who wants to take a leap year. There's still so much about the world she wants to explore and see before she settles down into her passion, sort of. And she feels like travel as well, if she ever gets a chance to, will make her such a better alchemist and give back to her country so much more.
Yeah, so where we're going to be starting here is that opportunity to travel, right? So Inara and her sisters will have been invited by the Gilded Rose to accompany her and some of the other council members to the Peacemeet, which is a 50-year reoccurring event where representatives from all the different countries kind of come to this massive set of structures that are in the center of this continent of Boramina. These structures that were built so long ago, the record of who built them kind of fell to the wayside, and this land is considered neutral territory nowadays. Every 50 years, folks from all the different countries send representatives, and folks amongst themselves take it to go and participate, because it's really just a great opportunity to become a mover and shaker, to kind of open up new trade routes, to express power, to show off to the other countries, to try and win favor. It's really an important opportunity to kind of advance society in a lot of different ways. So speaking of that, it totally makes sense that your mom would go. It makes sense that you'd go, that your sisters would go as an opportunity. Who else do you see from Luxoria going to an event like this?
Well, the emir for sure would be there. Emir Ramhun bin Malik is the voice of the people and the main representative of the council, so he would definitely be there. The Gilded Rose being the most silver tongued out of them all. And then I would imagine the master of merchants would definitely be there because movers and shakers, people are showing off, trying to create, I'm assuming, alliances, new trade routes. So I would imagine he would be considered an important presence. And of course, Inara is super excited because, as you said, a 50-year party basically means that it hasn't occurred in her lifetime yet. And so it is also her mother's first time there, so she's so excited to be a part of it.
I love that. I just want to, for a moment, get a different perspective on Luxoria. I'm intrigued by these indigenous dragonborn tribes.
So there are nomads in a harsh desert region, which means they could go days, weeks, traveling between one oasis and another. And that is basically what they do. They travel from one oasis to another, maintaining them, upkeeping them, and sort of patrolling the desert. And you have to be prepared for anything at any given time if that's the life you choose, because you don't know if that morning, you don't know if that day holds a sandstorm that's going to last a week or a giant sandworm that comes out of the ground underneath your caravan, or nothing at all. You know what I mean? Or you might just end up eating some bad cactus flesh. Like there's so much unknown that you have to be prepared for. And so I would imagine that the members of the nomad tribes are always on alert.
Perfect. So I want to focus back on Inara for just a little bit. As the third child of the Gilded Rose, this kind of important, long-standing council member, I want to walk through a scenario where, let's say, Inara is charged with showing a dignitary around the city, around the country as a whole, even if there's enough time for it. What would Inara make sure this dignitary saw? What is important to kind of convey to this person, this stranger who's never seen Luxoria, what makes Luxoria Luxoria to Inara?
Okay. So if they did have a chance to go tour the country, I would assume that the resort town, of course, would make the list. It is a beautiful place, sort of less likely to find those outskirts where the homes are maybe not as impressive, things like that, just because of the nature of the place, the beauty of it. They would take them there just to enjoy just some of the cuisine and the culinary inventiveness that Luxoria is known for. And of course, the beautiful sand beaches. And then there is the capital city, Wahid al Ahlam. The quarry is the country's biggest natural landmark that they're like their pride and joy. That's what they show off to people, anyone that comes. And it also has a bit of an emotional connection for the people. There's a special festival once a year. The longest day of the year, the sun hits the quarry in a special way, and it is said that you can hear the songs of the ancestors amongst the lights in the air. The prayers and the knowledge that all of these people have gathered among their travels and through their sacrifices to create this country, to create this haven where people can come live out their dreams. She has a lot of pride in where she's come from, being raised by a councilwoman, being raised in the capital, seeing a lot of growth happen very quickly because Luxoria is younger than the countries around it. So it has grown a lot faster in comparison. She does take a lot of pride in her country and does believe in a lot of the concepts and the cultural sort of building blocks that were instilled in her. After taking him to Fuad al-Sahra, the quarry, she would show this dignitary the biggest man-made landmark, which is actually related to the quarry. It is Tariq al-Turath. Tariq al-Turath is a bridge made of melted glass of all colors. So Tariq al-Turath translates to the path of heritage. And it was commissioned by the Gilded Rose during her first term to celebrate the festival of lights. It's a path towards the future. It's a path built upon our ancestors' knowledge, our ancestors' sacrifice, and it will carry them forward. And that was the message she wanted to bring into the city when she commissioned this.
Love it.
It starts off like in the center of the city, and it goes up pretty high actually, and leads to the medical research facility slash campus. Let's call it that. It's a giant bronze bridge with all this glass. And because of the glass, it does cast light on the market, the open bazaar underneath it. And people can walk it to the medical center, where there are these beautiful hanging gardens, like terraces all over the building. And Inara would then take them on a tour of these gardens. Each of them has their own terrace where they have cultivated and grown all these medicinal herbs, flowers, what have you, that might either be not native to the desert and so will not be found naturally, or things that they may have cultivated themselves, hybrids and such. I would say, other than that, Inara would take a dignitary to the market, maybe get them some food, and then possibly try to wrangle them into one of her experiments if her mother doesn't catch her first. Because, like I said, Inara's experiments are a bit of a wild card, and you may lose a finger or some eyebrows, and she won't feel bad because, hey, you experienced something new, you learned something. That was a win.
I love it. Is there anything else about Luxoria in its current form that you want the audience to know going into the first episode?
That's a good question. I would like people to know about Luxoria is we are currently in the sort of starting middle of a drug epidemic. The main cities especially have found a strange substance being used by the citizens in the streets, highly addictive, highly psychedelic, and it's grown into a concern really quickly because, one, they don't know where it came from. They don't know if this is something that someone within the country has discovered somewhere in the desert, or if this is something coming in from somewhere else. But also because this is a place where skill and merit and hard work are so essential to being a member of the culture, and for the culture to survive as a whole. If this were to grow and affect more people, more of just the general population, that could spell like disaster for the country. So nipping it in the bud is a priority for a lot of the people in charge. And then on a personal note for Inara, this is something that she's never seen or experienced, so she's extremely curious about the substance. On a more scientific level, really wants to get her hands on some to play with, but doesn't dare bring it into the house while she still lives with her mother.
I love that as this like secondary
Just like,
goal of
yeah, we
hers.
care about the people, and of course addiction, but also can I have some to play with? And I promise I
Make
won't
it
smoke
explode.
it.
A journal entry from Inara on the way to the Peacemeet.
Oh my god. Mother just called me to her sitting room. She says since I've proven over the last 2 months that I can conduct my experiments without destroying her home or hurting anyone, that I may join her, Sema, and Leilani at the Peacemeet. I'm so glad I was able to quickly contain the fire from last night's experiment before anyone noticed. I really didn't think adding the crushed Karoo rose mixture to the fire salamander blood would create so many sparks. I wonder what would happen if I tried feeding a live salamander some of the mixture. Could it possibly gain some form of fire ability? No. I'll have to wait till I return to test this out. I cannot risk losing this opportunity. Mother says this is my chance to use everything I've learned at court out in the real world. If I can prove myself useful to Mother and the rest of the council members, I'm sure she would allow me to explore the wares from these new lands during my free time. It's been 50 years since the last time anyone's been to this gathering. One can only imagine what new materials and science these countries have discovered since then. Catahara has told me so many stories about the abundant flora and fauna in Medea, and I could only imagine what strange wonders can be found in Perian. Graven doesn't like to speak much of his life before escaping to Luxoria, and as much as it kills me, I dare not ask or risk upsetting my dear friend by bringing up his mutation again, especially not after that lightning storm last time. Anyway, I must spend the next month practicing my diplomacy skills and learning the necessary phrases in other languages if I am to make the most of this chance.
I should have made you play like an improv game with me where we like did physical movement and shook our bodies about and all that. That would have been fun. Welcome back to the Lands That Make Us, a collaborative D&D 5th edition podcast where I and four of my favorite players work together to create four amazing, diverse cultures that we will then explore as the sandbox for this campaign. Today, I'm joined by the player I've definitely known the longest, Mickey. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I am Rob's older brother. I'm in my 30s. I'm a big nerd who really likes movies and Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a trans guy. Have known Rob his whole life, obviously.
That's very true. And how long have you been playing Dungeons and Dragons for?
Over a decade at this point. I originally, for my first two adventures, played Pathfinder, the crunchier Dungeons and Dragons, which I don't think returning to anytime soon. So yeah, like 10, 12 years since I've been playing as a DM and a player.
I've definitely been a player in Mickey's campaigns as well. Mickey's an excellent DM. Mickey is also so good at voices, which I'm sure we will see at different points in this campaign. I'd love to know, what's your favorite part about Dungeons and Dragons?
I think it's sort of bifurcated. I said bifurcated. See, this is the exact shit you're talking about.
You can't just casually drop bifurcated.
I think my favorite thing about D&D is split along the sort of player DM lines. Whereas a DM, I like making twists for my players that really engage them and get them into sort of the role-playing side of the gameplay. As a player, I like to create needlessly complicated backgrounds for my characters, which I think will benefit, hopefully, this campaign and project that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm certain that it will. First of all, what is your country's name?
My country's name is Perian. Perian? Perian.
A great country name. Perfect. Tell me a little bit more about Perian. Let's start with the perspective of a bird kind of flying from the south to the north of your country. And in very broad terms, what do they see?
I think at the southernmost point would be the end of the floodplain. the spot where all of the rivers deposit sort of the sediment there, which is an alluvial floodplain. Some of it is used as farmland, and part of it is a mud flat, which in my mind borders a desert coast. But this floodplain in my country, as the bird flies over it, only sees one smaller settlement, and a lot of the rest of it is abandoned or being picked over by scavengers because it's kind of irradiated because of the ether. Next thing the bird would see as it flies northward is a series of canyons, and there are these pillars, these plateaus that are crisscrossed by these gulches and canyons. And at the bottom of these gulches and canyons is a resource, an ether, a gas or miasma or radiation that forms the basis of the economy of Perian, such as it is, because anything that can take part in the ecology that are down there amid that miasma, that ether, which are creatures we would think of in our world as like things that live near volcanic vents, or extremophiles, things that live in extreme conditions. Anything that can take part in those conditions down there are sort of radiated by this miasma, and the stuff used from them can create incredible resources. As we watch that area be flooded, which is the main way that my country gets stuff done, by flooding these canyons, we fly north to see the source of the flooding, and as we do, we pass these enormous iron and steel gates that look like cathedrals. There's 3 of them. One of them's the biggest. The bird only glimpses them as it heads towards the Stormwell Mountains, this massive mountain range where these storms are formed and sent down across the sort of sloped landscape of Perian.
What kind of color tones are we working with here?
Deeper blues and cobalts, dark stone, and earth tones, I think is mostly what we're looking at. The plain at the bottom, that floodplain, looks sort of washed out and muddy. Like I said, the flooding process has kind of destroyed the natural stuff that's going on down there and given way to something different.
I know in the start, in the kind of more dangerous areas that is more filled with this ether and less explorable, there's just that one settlement and mostly scavengers. But when it flies over the north, I'm sure it sees kind of larger settlements and gatherings of folks.
Over actually in that shattered area, in that area of gulches and canyons, there is the one main city of Perian, Breg, Brehg, and it's on one of these pillars. The pillar is actually lower than the other ones around it, so if the city is kind of depressed into the overall landscape, and that's to provide it some safety from the storms. The other thing that provides it safety from the storms is this dark stone, this dark blue tinged or blue veined stone that it's mostly constructed of. And it's these tall, dark towers, maybe with some stained glass windows. And these towers are always crackling with sort of a static electricity because they're composed of a stone that's quarried or was quarried from the Stormwell Mountains, which is a stormstone that can harness the electricity and store it and feed it back later. And because of that, Breg is a very technologically advanced city because it has these sort of built-in battery capabilities.
I love that. Let's dive further into Breg. So is Breg also the political capital of Perian?
Yes, and it used to be more of a seat of political capital and power when Perian was a monarchy, which is a condition Perian shook off about a decade ago, maybe a little less than a decade ago. Now it is the seat of the new parliament, which is a place that can represent everyone in Perian, including, and very importantly, the freed slave population. Because when that monarchy was overthrown, a big part of that effort was abolition within Perian. That is something the parliament, we have those freedmen, we have people from the houses, the 3 houses that sort of originally formed the Ardavian, what would you call it? Not like monarchy, but high society. And then there is a workman class, which is entirely devoted in almost, I would say, religious sense to public works, which is those gates. Those gates that are massive, and they are lowered and raised to allow the flooding of certain canals and canyons, the massive sluice gates of Perian.
The sluice gates of Perian. I love that
Yes.
so much.
The sluice gates, they're sort of monasteries unto themselves, and they're populated by the sluice guard, which are a almost holy order of individuals devoted to this massive system of public works, because it is so dangerous to operate them and to live in Perian amongst the storms and the ether. There's a culture of devotion to that ritual.
So tell me a little bit more about the previous existence of kind of a slavery structure here. Obviously, there's going to be some upheaval and change in the wake of, one, a big governmental shift, and two, a big economical policy shift, joining the other countries of this continent and becoming free states. What were the main drivers behind the slavery structure? I mean, that's obviously slavery has its benefits. I'm not here to make you argue the benefit of slavery, but what was kind of the place
economically, obviously not.
Yeah.
There is the previous king of Perian was an individual named Akratus, who was the final person in this line of monarchs that thought the only way to benefit off the ether and the ecology it created was to throw slaves at it, was to use slave labor because of the high risk of that work, to get whatever they could, whatever benefits they could, by just devoting whatever human cost necessary to finding it. And that was something that couldn't continue. There was a abolition movement within the country, and then there were people within the established power structure that knew it was time to move on from a monarchy, that's where my guy comes in. But that was sort of the situation. It was a coup that was, you can't really call it bloodless. I would say there were battles and skirmishes, but it wasn't an all-out civil war. We managed to capture the king's sons, and sort of get him to a place of imprisonment, which is maybe not ideal, but it was a bloodless coup. We didn't kill him outright.
So does that mean the king and his son still live?
They do. Guard is, I think.
I want to know a little bit more about just like a day in the life of an average member of the society who is a member of that worker class who isn't a member of the sluice guard. What are the other everyday positions here? What is it like to just live a life here? What meals are eaten? What kind of, what's the culture like a little bit? But what fun is had,
The day in the life of someone in Perian, I think, varies a lot by which of those sort of geological regions they live in. If you live in Breg, you live, I mean, not exactly a life of luxury. The storms are present and dangerous, but there is technology, there's artificery, there's libraries and study and machines and elevators, I don't know, signs of society that can function off of the stormstone or stromstone. And because of that, maybe you can, the parliament is there, you could always go and sit on a parliamentary hearing, but a job sort of in that city would be a tradesman's job, someone maybe an importer or exporter of the kind of resources you can only find around Breg. Someone who does stonework. I think the stormstone supplies is dwindling, but that's always there. Any wizards that operate with electricity or any sort of study of that, is done there. But there's not a lot of production inside Breg, I would say. There is maybe a degree of luxury. You could go listen to an opera in Breg. You could, there's art there, because there is patronage, which I think has mostly recovered after the sort of upheaval that we've gone through. If you are further to the north, maybe one of the freed colonies around Stormwell Mountain, especially the other big city, which is Netter's Rally. Netter's Rally was previously one of the last points if you were trying to flee the country as a slave. It was like the last point where you could no longer argue you were attempting to make that escape. The last point of deniability. And after the coup, there were a lot of freed slaves who obviously did not want to live near Breg or near the Sluiceguard or along the canyons where the work was done to harvest ether and ether byproducts. So they all established Netter's Rally, which has experienced a big explosion in growth because of that. Over this last decade, just an enormous population increase up there, because it's one of the few places that you can take part in your own economy. A day in the life of someone there would be more towards farming. There's some plateaus up there at the base of the Stormwell Mountains where you can do some farming, because the ether is lower down on the plain. So there are some plateaus that are used for that, for herd animals. And well, one of the only things you can do in that area is harvest the mucus of the giant eels.
Tell me more about the mucus of the giant eels. Just real quick, listener note, Netter's Rally borders Luxoria. That is the border of Luxoria. It's very, very close to that, just blocked by this kind of large mountain range, with some tunnel systems going through, as well as some of those large canyons that carry straight through into the Dune Sea. Tell me more about harvesting this eel material, its purpose, and byproduct, and what comes out of it,
Right.
and
So
process
yes,
of harvesting it.
the process, there is a type of eel that can live in these slightly ether irradiated waters by Netter's Rally. They are enormous, and they have a particular mucus. This mucus, because they are so close to the ether, because they are in the water that is from that floods those parts of the canyons at all times, they create a mucus that can be harvested. The process of harvesting it is incredibly dangerous, as a lot of the work in Perian is. But to harvest it, you have to, while the passages are flooded, descend into one of the empty, enormous eel holes and scrape the mucus off of the sides. But this is worth it, because this mucus, as an alchemical agent, as an alchemical ingredient, is incredibly rare and valuable.
I'm proud of you for not saying region.
I thought about it.
I know. All right. So what is it that makes this mucus so incredibly rare and valuable?
It all goes back to the ether. It all goes back to the that magical radiation at the base of Perian. It's something that, unless the caverns are flooded, you can't exist in it. It erodes anything created by people, any suits, any machinery, and if you're in it just by yourself, it can change you magically. It can mutate you in unexpected ways. Also, this eel mucus can be used to create an incredibly addictive psychoactive drug.
Okay, yeah, no, that I definitely understand why people risk everything to get it out there. So close to Netter's Rally, these drugs are probably sold into Luxoria as well, in terms of the processed eel mucus, which is great. Love that. All right, so that gives me a really good picture of what it's like to live in Perian, kind of across the different cultures here. One quick question: what does the species make up as you kind of travel through Breg and Netter's Rally? What species do you see?
In Breg proper, you're going to see a lot of the races that are more inclined towards magic. Some elves, and I think definitely some earth and water genasi, which would have a particular advantage and I think closeness to this area. But Breg, I think, is pretty limited in its variety in terms of the makeup there. Netter's Rally, on the other hand, has a much more varied population. Notably, they have a lot more of the flying species, which were enslaved by Perian due to their ability to sort of fly over and see the storms and the canyons, so they could predict the storms and the way the flooding would go. Any water-breathing sort of individual species that has less access to magic, I don't know, maybe a sea elf, a triton, something like that. And I guess tieflings probably too. Whoever, anybody who could take a lot of damage. It was hard work down in the canyons.
I love it. So in Breg, you mentioned this kind of monastic order that guards these sluice gates that control the water flow of the country. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the day in the life of a sluice guardsman or someone who belongs to that order.
Yeah, the sluice guard they are religiously devoted to the public works of these gates. They are sort of monastic in their traditions. They have orders within their order that do things like only take care of the chains on the sluice gate, or only measure the way the water rises within a certain year. And they're totally devoted to opening these gates to flood these passages in ways that will allow for further exploration of the country. They wake up in the morning, have a pretty simple lifestyle, and whatever it is that they do in their day, they do it completely. And this also includes a more military based arm. The sluice gates are enormous targets, and so there are members of the sluice guard that just do guard the sluice, with big swords and a lot of metal armor. In order to achieve this monastic devotion to the sluice guard are a little more independent, and it was within that independence, that order, that my character grew up. Plato
Tell me more about Plato.
Ardavian is a member of Ardavian house. In the coup, he was one of the insiders within the monarchy that knew it had to change, and he helped his older sister, who was more of the talker, more of the orator, do that side of it, the political side of it, working from within to gather an abolitionist movement that could overthrow the king with pure numbers. He would look around the room and he had no allies anymore. That was what they achieved on their end, which was their promise to the revolutionaries outside, the actual population of slaves that wanted to be freed. I think the more military arm was the slave arm, which I guess probably partnered with the sluice guard. This is already too much. Like I told you, extremely complicated backstories for my guys.
It's perfect.
Let's just say that was a while ago for Plato, and he did what he had to do, and some of it was sort of dark and kind of not friendly stuff. And now he works for the sluice. He went back to doing what he loves, which is being a middle manager in a public works system. And he's kind of a grumpy, kind of frustrated guy within that system. I think he always thinks it could be done better. That kind of guy. It's sort of his position as someone who had helped with the coup, who is related to his sister, who's part of the parliament, that gives him enough political power that he has to go to this meet, whether he likes it or not.
I would love to hear just a little bit more about what is the day in the life, where and what is the day in life of Plato Ardavian.
He went back to work at the cathedral gate, the biggest gate within the sluice system. It was where he grew up, where his dad works. And his morning starts by getting up. He goes to the food hall early because he doesn't really like to talk to other people when he's eating his breakfast. Don't talk to him until he's had his coffee, I guess is what I'm saying.
Coffee thing in Perian.
Yeah, I think, like I said, there's specific luxuries within Perian. I think coffee, just for the visual of this grumpy Gus, is something he's got. After that, he goes to his office and he looks over reports for parts of the sluice or the gate or the dams that are wearing down. And he sometimes goes and visits those sites and he decides what parts need to be replaced. I'm laughing because, to me, this sounds very boring, but I'm already getting into being him, and he's so into it. And he decides what can be mended with magic versus what needs to be fully replaced. If artificers or workmen, like I said, there's a sort of workman class, need to be called in to do structural work. He does that for most of the day. He maybe goes to the top of the cathedral gate to eat his lunch by himself, where he can't be bothered by people asking him questions. He spends his evenings reading, maybe, engineering books, really dry stuff, or like old dad history novels. That's what he does for luxury in his free time. And he has maybe some office hours where he lets people come in and try and explain highly complex problems to him. But really a middle manager of a dude right now.
Focusing in on this Peacemeet, this is a grand event where every 50 years, members of each country kind of gather in the central point where all countries meet in this kind of lost valley of these huge structures that time has forgotten who created it, including this large pavilion where the meet itself will happen. This is really an opportunity for movers and shakers from across different cultures to kind of make a name for themselves as different trade routes, different agreements have been signed both internally with the countries, as important folks from each country will be there, as and externally with other countries, right? So a kind of a who's who of each place is there. So with that in mind, who from Perian would be attendant at this kind of 50-year Peacemeet of all the countries, and bring us in a little bit more about it sounds like he's kind of hesitant, but a little bit more about Plato's motivations for going or reasons for having to go. Who else would be going from Perian, kind of their motivations, and what on a base level Perians are looking to achieve here.
Absolutely. For Plato's part, he was sort of not exactly tricked into it, but I said he's kind of a sort of a perfectionist. He always thinks it can be done better. So when his sister, who's more of the political leader, was like, well, I can always send someone else, he was like, no, they'd mess it up. And so he went as sort of the representative of this public works division, but the other people from Perian who would be going would be representatives from these sort of political groups that now form our parliament. There is a freedman division, and there's a sluice guard division, and there's a merchant division, and this royal the houses division that also still have representation. And I think to try and be fair, we would allow those individual divisions to sort of select their own representative that they would want to send. I'm not sure if I'm here on just the sluice guard or if I'm here for the sluice guard and the royal. I do kill two birds with one stone, though. Like I said, there's not a monarchy anymore.
I think the king in prison has asked you to bring along one of his sons.
I think that's fair. I have.
Would you?
Yeah. There's I think he has a slightly older 16 to 17-year-old son. But when you're keeping a royal ward, you're not supposed to actually keep them as a prisoner, right? You're supposed to kind of train them up. It's part of the deal of it. So maybe he's operating as Plato's not teaching assistant, but his assistant, his what's a squire when you're in management? In terms of what Perian wants from this meet, we're looking for sort of outside economic intervention, as I mentioned earlier, with stuff like the Stormstone, which used to be quarried up by the Stormwell Mountains. There's a lot of economy in Perian that's just not operational anymore in the wake of the coup, which is good because people aren't dying doing that very dangerous work. But we need to find ways to get at the resources that are the backbone of our economy. And it wouldn't hurt if we could also do, I guess, maybe a little PR work, because we are the country that had a lot of slaves, and we don't anymore. But
Perian,
I think
we don't anymore.
We don't anymore. That's part of it. I think only a little bit of what we could do before in terms of collecting the stuff down there that's caused by the ether, the magical residue that we use, or the plants that we harvest and make alchemy solutions out of. We can sort of do it now using like diving bells when the passages are flooded, but that's not reliable. So it's time to stop being as isolationist.
Well, question for you. If Plato was assigned, let's say there's a visiting dignitary who is coming to see the country, and Plato is assigned to show them the most important sites, to get a good feel of the country, to do that PR work. what would Plato ensure this dignitary saw?
It's interesting. He would take him, probably, let's be honest, to the cathedral gate. This massive monument to intricate public works that is the backbone of his society. And he probably wouldn't want to be doing it. So he'd kind of throw a lot of boring facts at the dignitary, take him around and really intricately explaining like what a certain type of wheel does in the raising process of the fifth back gate, just really drown him in facts. But if he was being responsible and doing the PR work, he would, probably go to Netter's rally and show that there's a possible future where we're developing a place together. And that place has its issues. Any growing place would, and we're working through them. But, there is a future there inside our country together.
Are there still folks in Perian who hold the position that the monarchy and this indentured servitude-based system was superior and should be returned to?
I mean, every system has its traditionalists. I think we've really tried to convince them over this past period of post, abolition, but not everyone's been convinced. And there were people who had it better in the old days when people were making a lot of money off of death that would love to, return to the old ways, to flush out Netter's rally and take everyone there back. But that's not the future Plato's hoping for.
Is there anything else that you want folks to know about Plato going into the first episode?
Another thing he do in his free time, which is that he's definitely the type of guy who has like a scale model of a canyon system that he's working on in his basement or something. He's got a little... He just loves those gates so much.
Oh,
I think the first thing you would notice if you were looking at Plato was that one of his arms is water. I mentioned that sometimes spending time in the ether can change you in ways you didn't expect. And, well, he spent some time down there, and now he has an arm made of water. And magic. He's a sorcerer.
was that his awakening from the ether?
Yes, it's as insofar as sorcery touches a magic within you and lets you express that magic. Yes. Well, other members of his family were more magically inclined. As I mentioned, this is a society where magic, knowing how to do magic, is highly valued. It's sort of what created that upper class originally. And he was more of a wizard, and now he's a sorcerer.
We'll learn what kind of sorcerer when we play.
Yes.
But I think we could all make some guesses. What are the practicalities of having an arm made of water? What is the logistics of that? What is the lifestyle changes that brings?
Yeah, so he has found a way, I think, to use it as a multi-tool. In a way, as I said, his job has a lot of maintenance. You got to get into small areas. Of arm that can become very flowy works with that, and I think he could maybe even like freeze just a little bit of it to use it as a wrench sometimes. I'm not sure, but he can get in there and do the fine tuning work. If he did ever have to pick a lock in the past, it probably would have been good for that too, huh?
I love it. Is there anything else from an audience perspective that you want to share about Perian going into this first episode?
Perian is very dangerous. It's a place where everyone who lives there in one way or another has learned how to respect that danger. The danger of the storms, the danger of the enormous iron gates, the danger of the canyons. They know that you can't fool around. And I think that creates their cultural identity.
A letter from Plato of House Ardavian to his sister Nori in Bray on the way to the Peacemeet.
Dear Nori, do me the favor of not gloating to the council that you've tricked me. I'm sure you and Rainier are having a great time, as I will have you know. I can barely sleep amid all this wilderness. Others in the delegation have been leaving me be. I think they are still frightened, at least the older ones. Acradio has been spending time with them, started glancing at me as well. Oh well, we all must grow up. I have at least been able to talk with Draeger, who could hold a conversation on water displacement with any sluicer. They have been showing me designs for irrigation canals. Truly fascinating. We are making our way up along the border mountains now. It won't be long. If you can keep this to yourself, I'm becoming a little proud. For the first time, perhaps, we are a bit brand new. I have, however, used my entire coffee ration, so I will be appropriating some from the delegation supply under my own authority. Trust me, this is best for everyone. Keep a weather eye. Plato.